Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 126 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. So today, voice is a little off, dealing with some sinus, I think probably allergies, either that or deathly illness, one of the two. But just dealing with the weather change, dealing with bad sinuses, man. So I sound a little off on the podcast. Don't worry if you just listen to the audio. This isn't an impersonator. You can go to YouTube. You can see that it's Josh still on there. I know that we've been waiting for the PC police to shut me down, but it's not happening today. Today is not the day. Yeah, today is a day where we go through 10 mistakes that white belts make. And honestly, every single mistake that we are going to go through, you see black belts make them too. You see everybody make these mistakes, and unaddressed, if you take until you're black belt to learn one of these lessons, it can cause a lot of problems. When you're a black belt, it can cause a lot of problems for your students if you have them. And so this isn't just an episode for white belts. This is an episode to kind of say, hey, here are 10 things that you probably shouldn't do in jiu-jitsu. And of course, these things are my opinion. If you guys want to do these things, freaking do them. I don't care. But don't say I didn't warn you. This is a random one. This is definitely a random show. I think every episode is a random show anymore. You know what's interesting? I am getting geared up to do a bunch of interviews. I have in place probably 5 different people I'm going to interview, and then probably a few more that I'm going to message while I start to get the ball rolling on interviews. And something interesting about doing a bunch of interviews, something that I noticed is people tend to, the listeners don't really tend to change whether or not I'm not doing an interview, where I'm just doing a solo episode. It seems like people like the show. They're the people that like the show, just like the show. So that's cool. That's really nice to know. But if there are people you guys want to hear me interview, usually I just interview my friends, and the reason is because those are the best conversations. But there are still people that I don't know that I should probably interview. A lot of my best episodes, a lot of friendships that I've made because of the podcast have been on interviewing people that I don't know. So if there's anybody that you guys can think of that I should be interviewing, you should let me know. Josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com. Or if you have any ideas on episodes, there's a lot of episode ideas that I get that I've been kind of saving or even recording and keeping hidden. So there's certain episodes that I can't go to yet, but I've talked about doing it. I just haven't gotten to release them yet. But that's for super secret. You guys can't know about that. I can't even believe you guys got me to bring that up. This intro really went off the rails. Let's just go ahead and jump into 10 mistakes most white belts make. Ha, just kidding. It's Josh. Before I start talking to you guys about 10 things that mistakes that white belts make. First, I need to tell you guys just about what you should do in the next 3 days. If you are listening to this episode on the day that it comes out, or anytime before the Saturday, so it should come out on a Thursday, that will be April 28th. Anytime during the month of April. So you have 3 days now. At simplifyingjujitsu.com, mastering the duck guard is 40% off. And that is really exciting for me because this is the first instructional that I ever did that was different. That wasn't just the same cookie cutter, here's a list of moves. We kind of filmed the instructional differently. I explained the techniques differently. And the concept, the idea of simplifying grip fighting by just using one very important grip, it's something not a lot of people do. So this is a very unique instructional. And for right now, it is 40% off at simplifyingjujitsu.com. That's all I have for you. I'll switch over to Josh to tell you for real this time about 10 mistakes that most white belts make. Mistake one that most people make, in my opinion, white belts, blue belts, purple belts, brown belts, black belts, and this is a lot of times in the beginning of their jujitsu journey, one of the biggest mistakes that we make is we train at one place. And we start out, we go into the first gym that we see, and no matter what, you want to do jujitsu. So even if the vibe is off, even if it doesn't seem like a place that you really want to be at, you still sign up because you want to learn jujitsu. Well, nowadays, for most people, there are multiple places to train. When I started, I think there were like three schools that taught real Brazilian Jiu Jitsu within an hour. There really weren't, at least that I knew of, there really weren't many Jiu Jitsu schools. Now, in the exact same place, there are probably 20, 25 schools within an hour. Jiu-jitsu is growing. We're seeing it in small places. We're seeing it in large places. But a big thing to keep in mind is that means that there's going to be a lot of variety of places to train. I think it's really important for people to go experience places to train, especially in the beginning. That doesn't mean you don't sign up at the first place you go to and stay there forever. Sometimes you do that and it's amazing. But if you never experience any other type of training, how do you know that your jujitsu is even any good? How do you know that what you're learning is the best way to be learning it? And the traditions that you're having to follow that you don't love, people 5 minutes down the road maybe not having to follow that tradition. I think it's just so burned into us that no matter what our first choice is, we better be right. I think maybe that comes from school, right? You're not allowed to really ask questions. You're not allowed to be wrong. You take your test, and if you make it, you pass, and if you don't, well, you're a failure. And if you find answers, if you sneak in answers yourself, you're a cheater, right? Those are pretty much your choices when it comes to school. Well, jujitsu schools are not like that. You can choose where you want to learn, and you can choose what you want to learn. And we'll get into a little more of variety of training in a little bit on some of these other points. But the big thing, I think, big mistake that a lot of people make is they go and sign up at a place that they don't necessarily love. Jiu-jitsu should be fun. It should be something that you enjoy. And so if you don't like where you're training at, if you don't like how you're being taught, you don't necessarily have to leave. It doesn't mean you don't like it. You should just leave right then. But I think you should experiment with going to some other places, training some other things or some other ways. What'll happen most of the time is you will either gain an appreciation for the gym that you already have. You'll go, wow, everybody else sucks. Our gym is really tough. Or you'll go, wow, my coach does such a better job explaining stuff. I really understand more when my coach talks. Or maybe you find the opposite. Maybe you find that that new place is the place to be. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. You are paying to be part of that business, right? You're paying to be part of that team. You're paying to be a part of that school. So it's okay for you to go to a different school. It's okay for you to say, okay, well, this is my choice. You're running a business. I choose to go to a different business. Or a lot of places nowadays are cool if you want to supplement training at two places. I think some coaches might get offended by that, but that's their problem. I think I don't know. It's just it's a weird thing where we have to worry about like our coaches' feelings on where we train, right? So I think that's all I'll say on that. We'll go to point number two. So the second thing I see a lot of people do, and this isn't just white belts. Nothing on this list, I don't think, is just white belts. These are problems that a lot of people carry through all of their jujitsu. They just avoid the situations more and more, so they never actually have to learn anything from it. And that is getting frustrated when you win or not when you win, when you lose, or when you're struggling to learn something. A lot of times people get so frustrated. They get so upset about not being able to grasp something, not being able to grasp a new technique, or they get so upset because they're losing and they're losing to somebody who hasn't been training as long or shouldn't be able to beat them in their mind, right? In their eyes. And these are two things, they seem a lot different, but they both have the same result. You get frustrated. And usually, what happens when you get frustrated, for most of us, is you start to make excuses. For most people, when you're losing in the gym, the first thing you think is, "Well, this guy's bigger than me. This guy is this guy's stronger. This guy, or he's been training longer. That's the only reason he beat me." And you kind of make these little things in your head, and you say, "Well, that's the only reason he beat me." And the problem with that mindset, the problem with that mentality, is if I accept that, okay, this person only beat me because he's stronger, then I don't ever decide, okay, there is a technical reason, there is a strategic reason that he beat me. And it's not just strength. Of course, sometimes people are just stronger and they're going to beat you, but that does not mean that there aren't lessons to learn from that round. The idea of getting frustrated when we're not learning or when we're losing, it usually doesn't help us at all. Usually it pushes us towards, well, I have to avoid this feeling, so I got to make excuses for it. And we all know who I'm talking about, the guy that you roll with, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, man, my knee's just been bothering me. That's why you beat me." Or you like, "Oh yeah, well, I really only do no gi. Yeah, I'm really only a no gi guy. I don't even train in the gi, so that's why you beat me." And you're like, "Dude, I guillotined you. That's a no-gi move. You should be able to stop that, right?" But people make excuses. And instead of making excuses, if you just respond and say, "Okay, well, I need to get better. It is on me to get better. I need to learn from this." That little mentality change, if you do that early on, if you do that as a white belt, you will be so far ahead of most blue belts and most purple belts. Honestly, a lot of black belts that I still hang out with, that I still go with, they do that not only in competition, make excuses, but they'll even do it in training. You'll always start to roll and yeah, I'm really tired today. Yeah, I'm just feeling a little off today. Okay, let's roll. And like people say that to me when they assume that I'm going to beat them, instead of just being like, "Okay, well, I'm here to train. Doesn't matter if I'm tired. It doesn't matter if you're bigger than me. It doesn't matter. I'm just here to get better at jujitsu." Shifting that mindset, making your mindset about getting better and not about winning, makes you get frustrated way less. You're still going to get frustrated in jujitsu. If it's something you care about, expect to have passion for it, expect to get frustrated. But when you are consistently getting frustrated and you're letting it ruin your night of training, when you lose, and a lot of people do that. A lot of people go, "Well, I had a bad night of training or had a good night of training or whatever." I don't think it's like that. I think training is training. You have the same goal every night, get better, right? Yeah, we put small goals. Yeah, we want to beat certain guys in the gym. That's normal. But you're still just trying to get better. If you shift your focus on getting better and not on whether or not you're winning, it's not so much about performance. You are going to get better, because that's what your focus is on. Now we'll look at number 3. And this is exactly what we were just talking about and having focus. A lot of people try to learn everything all at once. They decide that they're going to get good at jujitsu. And so they try to get good at jujitsu. They try to get good at everything. Well, I need to know a little bit from every single position, and then I'll be good, right? I'll have moves to go for from every position. And I just don't think that that is the best way to start jujitsu. And honestly, I don't think it's the best way to get good at jujitsu, even if you've been training for a long period of time. Focus is the one thing that separates people that get good from people that don't. It's always been like this. I've trained jujitsu for 14 years. I've been around so many different people. I've run 2 different schools. I've been coaches at other ones. I've really been around jujitsu a lot. And the one thing that separates people, besides consistency, on whether or not they get good, is focus. When you have guys that are the same amount consistent, 2 guys that come in 3 days a week, The guy that has a focus always gets better than the guy that doesn't. I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds like, well, some people just naturally get better. And yes, there are going to be a few people. There will always be outliers, right? That just don't need focus and they just come in, and usually they're like very, very athletic, right? Usually they're very, very athletic people, and they're able to just learn very small parts of jujitsu. And then we've talked about this before. They're able to use their athleticism to leap from one idea or one technique to the other. And they use athleticism to fill a lot of gaps. For most of us, that's just not an option. We can't do jujitsu this way, right? We need to become better technicians. We need to have a deeper understanding. One of the best ways to find a deep understanding of something is to obsess about it. And I've talked about this on the podcast. I've talked about like ways I like to think about jujitsu, but it's always good. It's always helpful and maybe give you a different idea on it. So, for instance, I really have been liking the idea of taking the back while trying to guard pass. Just using that is a dynamic. I think it adds a huge layer to your game. It also, some guys are really flexible and really hard to pass, and they create certain positions where chasing their back makes more sense. And so what I decided to do is I decided to focus on it. I watched some instructionals on it. I watched a lot of live videos on it. But then I started to just ask myself questions about it and believe that I could figure it out. And so training with one of my purple belts, we were looking at kind of like where to put your hands while you're trying to chase the back, when to dive for the back take. And you're trying to create big ideas, but we're only focused on one thing. Right? I'm not saying, okay, I need to get good at chasing the back from top. So that means I should get my guard passing better. And then, well, I'm going to pass the guard sometimes. So I better work on my side control too and mount also, just those top pins. Well, no, I've kind of lost the purpose of focus. What I should do is say, I'm going to obsess about chasing the back until I feel very sufficient at it, or until I get bored of it. A lot of times it's just fun. You can make jujitsu so much fun by hyper focusing on something that you like about jujitsu. When I say that, obviously we all like anything that works, but there are still certain things, and we all have them, that when you hit, you smile. When you hit, you go, oh my gosh, I love that move. Or you just go, wow, that was fast, or wow, that felt smooth, or wow, that was easy to do. We all have moves like that. Those are the moves that you should obsess about, in my opinion, on jujitsu. This is not from a this will make you best standpoint. I think that there are probably certain moves, certain techniques, certain ideas that have more value than others, right? But your interest is really important for jujitsu. What inspires you, what makes you excited is important. For me, it's trying to chase the back from top. I talked about like a few months ago, it was distance management. That was like all I wanted to talk about. And then I would go and talk to my friends that were MMA fighters and say, hey, show me distance management from a striking standpoint that has nothing to do with grappling, and show me it from wrestling. And then, I asked so many people about it and looked at it in so many different ways, and it's a ton of fun. Eventually I started to run into a lot of the same answers, and I started to go, okay, I think I've got an idea. I've got some level 1 understanding of distance management. I'll probably go back to it again 6 months from now, a year from now, whenever it excites me again. But that is, I think, how you try to focus on in jujitsu, just how you keep yourself from trying to learn everything all at once. So that brings me to point 4. I've been making a lot of statements in this episode. How do you know that any of them are true? I make a lot of statements that are very matter of fact on my podcast. How do you know if they're true or not? You've got to test them. I think for so many people, the number 4 mistake that they make is that they take everything from a higher belt as gospel. People have told me stuff when they were blue belts and I was a white belt that I believed for years. And for example, one guy I remember, this wasn't a blue belt, this is actually a black belt, taught this. He taught this armbar defense, and he said, if you can get your elbow to this position, no matter how hard they pull, they can't finish you. Okay. And that wasn't true. Uh, and I used that defense a lot and it worked for quite a while. And one time I was in a tournament, I think I was a purple belt, and I used that same defense for the armbar. And the guy just kept cranking my arm and cranking my arm, and it was getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And I still wasn't able to comprehend. I was going, no, he said if my elbow is here, I can't get submitted. And this is starting to hurt really bad. This doesn't make sense. It's because I believed something because a guy was a black belt. I go, oh, yeah, it's got to be true. He's got to be right. It's not always like that. They are not always right. Sometimes black belts make mistakes. Sometimes we do things unconsciously and then we try to explain it to you, like I do a guard pass without even thinking about it. Then when I go to explain it to you, I just explain it in the exact same way it was explained to me, even though at this point I do it totally different. I just show you the exact way that it was explained to me. I'm not good at being conscious about what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, and how I'm doing it, right? But because I'm a black belt, you go, well, it's got to be true. And then it doesn't work for 6 months. You go like, well, it's still got to be true. Maybe I just showed you wrong. Maybe one of the statements that I made about this is the most important thing isn't the most important thing. So often taking things as gospel kind of screws you up in jiu-jitsu. It can be really tough when you are new, though. How do you know what works and what doesn't? I can tell you one thing that for sure works, no matter what. If you are brand new to jiu-jitsu, the most important thing is focusing on one thing. Episodes 1 and I think 99 of the podcast are about the end goal method of jiu-jitsu. Listen to either one of those. 99, I'm a lot more polished. My microphone is better. And I'm a much better podcast instructor. But 1 is still fun too, because, hey, it's episode 1 and it's still relevant. It is, in my opinion, focus is like the most important thing when it comes to jiu-jitsu. You experiment with focus, you will have success. You will find that, wow, I'm getting better at this move that I'm focusing on more than I ever get better at anything else. And so don't take everything you hear as gospel, test it. Even the stuff that I say on this podcast, a lot of the stuff that I say on this podcast are ideas that I am in the middle of testing and trying out. And if they don't work, I'll tell you guys. But usually that's not how it goes. Usually it's an idea that I have and I try it and I test it for months and then I tweak it and then I tweak it and then I tweak it and then I tweak it. And by the end of it, it's probably something totally different, but it's still complete, right? It's still at the end of the idea. And you guys should be doing that same exact stuff in jiu-jitsu. And then, of course, the more that you find people that tell you truth, the more you can believe what they say, right? The more you can just take it at face value. If you've listened to all 120 whatever episodes of this show that we've done, you will go, yeah, I can trust Josh. I know what he talks about. He's been consistent. He tells me the same kind of things all the time. He's never screwed me over except for when he, told me to tell my coach that shrimping was stupid. That screwed me over. But besides that, he's a pretty good guy, right? And so since you have that, it's easier to trust what I'm telling you. It's easier to trust what I have to say. And it's like that with me too. There are certain guys that I just trust what they tell me over anyone else when it comes to jiu-jitsu. There are certain people like that with life too. But when it comes to jiu-jitsu, I have certain people that I'm going to always go to first. I'm going to always ask first, and I'm going to always listen to first. And I think that is important to have too. So now we'll look at question 5. And I think question 5 is a tough one. But white belts a lot of times ask the wrong questions. So what that means, I really think the simplest way to explain the wrong question in jiu-jitsu is the unspecific question. The more specific your question is, the easier it is for anyone to answer, not just a high-level black belt. And since your goal of asking a question is to learn, is to get an answer and to learn from it, then it's probably a good idea to make sure your questions land, make sure your questions are answerable by anyone, right? So here would be what I would consider a bad question. What is the best way to pass guard? That's a really, really unspecific question. And there's no good way to answer it. It is not an answerable question. There isn't a best way to pass guard, right? Are you in gi or no gi? What guard is the person playing? What grips do they have? How far away from the person are you? Have you tried to pass their guard? How are they defending it, right? There are so many different variables that go into jiu-jitsu. And when you ask a broad question like that, it is impossible to answer. Okay. Now you could ask the exact, what feels like the same exact question, but it isn't. You say, hey, coach, what guard pass should I be focused on right now? Feels like the same question, right? But it is way more specific. What guard pass should you be focused on? Or what is the best way to pass the guard? You ask an unanswerable question, you don't get an answer. And then you usually get frustrated. You're usually like, man, these guys don't help me out at all. They're keeping the secret of the best guard pass to themselves. But there isn't a best guard pass. You've got to learn to be specific with your questions. Even with your technical questions, when the coach shows something and you go try it, try to be engaged the first time with what the coach was saying. So then you can actually ask good follow-up questions, specific follow-up questions. You can say, hey, you said that this underhook is the most important thing. What is it doing? Like, why is it important? Well, it's keeping the person flat, right? You can ask very specific questions about things that are being taught to you. But when you start to get broad, when he says the underhook is the most important thing, and you say, hey, what are the other places that underhooks matter? That can be a very broad question. Some coaches would like that actually, but that can be too broad of a question. The more specific your question, the easier it's going to be to answer, and the easier it is to answer, the more chance you are going to actually learn from it, right? You're going to actually come away with something that you can use. And so be mindful of the questions that you're asking and the results that you're getting from those questions. So maybe I ask a certain purple belt at the gym and it just doesn't seem what I ask. He gives me gold. That's going to be who I'm going to ask this question to, right? Maybe I ask the black belt at my gym, and maybe he's an amazing answerer of questions, but I just annoy him. I just ask him too much stuff. So he's not giving me the same value that purple belt is. Well, I'm going to be going to the purple belt to ask questions, right? So just pay attention to who you're asking, pay attention to what you're asking and the results that you are getting. Let's look at number 6. And this is one that I think a lot of people would say, but as per usual, I'm going to try to say it differently. So a lot of people would say, big problem that a lot of white belts come in with is going too hard. And I don't think that is true. I think that the problem that a lot of white belts have is going hard at the wrong times, or just going only hard, right? We talk about pacing on the show all the time, how important it is to know how much energy you have and to not gas, right? But also how important it is to try to wear out your opponent. There are so many levels of understanding pacing, right? But the first one that you usually get is when you say you're a brand new white belt and you're going with a purple belt, and he goes, stop going so hard. That's a terrible answer, to be honest. Okay, so don't go hard ever. Sometimes you should go hard. Sometimes there are positions that the only thing that is going to matter on whether or not you hit it or not is how hard you go, right? There are certain parts of jiu-jitsu we talked about last week. We talked about chaos and control jiu-jitsu. There are certain parts of jiu-jitsu that you need chaos, right? You just have to figure out when to use it and when not to. A good answer that purple belt would tell you, instead of don't go so hard, is learn when to relax. That would be a much simpler way, a much better way to think about not going too hard. So if you're a guy that is always considered like, man, you're always going hard on everything, you maybe you have the reputation of hurting somebody or hurting people, or you're just known as a spaz, which is in America is not an offensive word to any of my friends in the UK. It's a pretty normal word. I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm big on the political correctness. You guys know me. But what happens a lot of times is you are known for being this jerk when you roll, and it's just because you don't know when to go hard and when not to. So a lot of times, I think you should always think about going at 0%. I know that sounds weird, but I always start rounds. Like when I slap bump, my first thought is how little energy could I use and still win this round? How little energy could I use and still survive? Right. Sometimes I get my guard pass and my thought isn't, well, I got my guard pass, I need to get out. Unless, obviously there are certain competition scenarios where I do that. But I said do. But it's not always like that. Very seldom do I do that. Usually the training is, okay, well, I got my guard pass. Can I effortlessly survive and escape? Right. The more we can do jujitsu effortlessly, the more it's going to matter when we add back our effort, right? The more our strength matters when we're doing everything. When I don't need any strength to beat you up and then I use strength, I'm going to kill you, right? So you get good at not using your 100%. You only use it when you need to. The other thing that is hard for people, and you have to just be conscious about it. You really just have to think your way through this. That is the only way I've ever seen people make this adjustment. But so often you go in and you go, okay, so Josh talked about rolling like easier and kind of just like go starting at 0% and then seeing where I need to get to. Okay, now I'm at 30%, now I'm at 40%. Maybe you even get good at staying at 40 or 50% of your strength and energy, right? And you're feeling smooth and everything's going good. And then you got around with somebody you usually have a tough time with, and you start out 40, 50%, and then they make you work. They make you work for like 5 seconds. So often, once the switch is flipped, people have trouble unflipping it. They have trouble going from 40% to 100 and then back down. Once they hit to 100, we're at 100. We're fighting to the death. How you get good at this is you start to be conscious of it. You go, oh my gosh, I'm muscling. Chill. Even if it means losing the position, chill. Take a breath. Build a frame. Relax. Manage your distance better. Relax. Breathe. Now let's start to increase from 0 to 100 again, right? Or 0 to 40 again, and then only 100 when we absolutely need it. We really should be going slowly and being able to mind what pace we're going at. And for most people, they never learn how to do that. There is only one pace of jujitsu for them. Whether we're drilling, whether we are rolling live, there is one pace. And that is a habit that you have to get out of if you want to protect your body. Mostly you want to protect your training partners, and you want to learn to feel jujitsu. You can't feel anything while you are going 100%. You just can't. It's like if I flex every single muscle that I have really tightly, and then you like just gently poke me on the chest, I probably won't feel it. But if I am relaxed and I'm sitting and you poke me on the chest, I will go, oh my gosh, why'd you poke me on the chest, dude? I feel it very easily, right? Because I'm not tensed. I'm relaxed. So if we're trying to learn to feel jujitsu, then make sure that you are minding pacing. You are learning to relax, you're learning where to relax, and you're being conscious, right? You are being honest with yourself. And you go, okay, I'm using too much energy. I need to back it down. Now let's look. Actually, we won't go to 7. This was going to be only 7 points. And then I was like, I think I could do like 3 more. I think I could make it 10. So 7 should actually be the last one. So technically we're going to 8, but it is only the 7th point. I don't know why I explained that to you guys. Let's look at point number 7. That is turning BJJ into a job. We talked about it with a little bit when in the second point, we were talking about getting frustrated. But so often, jiu-jitsu becomes a job. I talk about this on the show all of the time. And I notice it because jiu-jitsu is my job. I run a podcast. I really don't make any money off the podcast, so that's not part of my job, but it's what I do with my time. I run Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu. I have 2 jiu-jitsu schools. Jiu-jitsu is my job. There is nothing else that I do that produces any money that doesn't involve jiu-jitsu, at least to some little bit, right? So jujitsu is my job, but the art of jujitsu is not my job. My job is school owner, right? Yes, it has to do with jujitsu. My job is jujitsu production company. Yes, it has to do with jujitsu, but those things have to be completely separate from the art of jujitsu for me. Because if they aren't, jujitsu starts to get frustrating for me. It starts to be something that I don't look forward to. I look to have different hobbies sometimes just because I get too obsessed with jujitsu and I make it the most important thing for me, right? And probably a lot of us do this with other things. A lot of us do it with money. A lot of us do it with our job position or whatever, right? We make it the most important thing and it becomes our identity. And so often in jujitsu, because of Instagram, because of just the current jujitsu model, the current jujitsu mentality, which is like, jujitsu is super cool. I need to tell everybody that I do it, and I need to separate myself from everybody else. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that those are things you should learn to do, but they have to be things that you learn to do. They can't just be your life. Eventually, you will create a training schedule that you hate. You will go to a gym that you hate. There will be people that you hate at the gym, and you cannot stand them, and you don't want to be around them. And you're really probably, maybe those people do suck, but usually you're just transferring how much you hate jujitsu to other things because you can't hate jujitsu, right? That's not something you can hate. It is very easy to hate jujitsu. Just make it something that you have to do. Just make it the only thing that gives you value. You'll hate jujitsu eventually. It's as crazy as that sounds. When you put so much pressure on yourself that you have to do something in grappling, it becomes not fun. And uh, for most of us, we went into jujitsu because it was fun. Maybe it was to lose weight. Maybe it was for self defense. Maybe we just wanted to compete in something. Uh, Regardless, though, what keeps you is the enjoyment of it. What keeps you is the fun. But as at some point for a lot of people, and some people this happens at white belt, but some people this doesn't happen until black belt. But jujitsu starts to feel like something you have to do. And if that ever happens, one of the easiest ways that I have found to change it is to just get away and train somewhere else. To just go into a session at some other gym with no other anticipation than I'm just here to have fun. I'm a new guy here and I'm here to have fun. Even as a black belt, I do this. I still go to my coach Kyle Watson's gym. I still go to Nick Sanderson Jr. Silva's gym, Revive. I go to those gyms because it keeps me sane. It's true jujitsu training for me. At my own gym, it can be tough sometimes to get the training that I want, right? Because I'm the owner there. It's my job when I'm there. So I go somewhere where it's not my job. I go somewhere and I go, okay, I just want to be coached. I want somebody to yell at me. I want them to say, oh, Josh hasn't gotten submitted today. Put him in the middle. Let's beat him up. Those things are fun, right? Those things are so much fun and they're so enjoyable. But sometimes we just get so close. We get so close to it. We get so close to the picture where the guy that cleans the mats, where the guy that helps the kids class, where the guy that helps all these other things at the gym, and the gym just becomes something we have to do. And so if that happens, just get out of it for a little bit. Make sure, find a way to make jujitsu fun again. Train a little differently, train with different people, do a competition. Don't do a competition. Take some time off competing. Just make a change and see if you can have fun with jujitsu again. That is, I think, for a lot of people, that advice right before they quit would keep them from quitting. So many people just quit because it stops being fun. And it's usually because it becomes a job. Let's look at point number 8. And that is taking yourself too seriously. I'll say this as a white belt first, but then we'll look at it from the other side of the coin because, I've been picking on white belts a little bit, right? So some people take themselves very seriously in jujitsu. Obviously, they can't get submitted, right? Guys that do that, they're the worst. Guys that will rather get hurt in training and then tap, right? Or again, they're your excuse makers. They're your people that do that kind of stuff. what you have to make sure that you do is have fun, right? You can't have fun when you take yourself so seriously. When you have to have this certain persona at the gym or at the tournament or whatever, you put so much pressure on yourself because we all want to be taken seriously, right? We all want people to believe in us. We all want people to like us. We all want to be taken seriously. Sometimes, though, we focus so much on it, and then people even start to like us. People start to take us seriously. And then we do stupid stuff. Like a lot of times when you go to a gym and a lot of the white belts are jerks, right? You go in, or the blue belts, or whatever belt is a jerk. You start to go, okay, these guys are like bullying me. A lot of times it's because they take themselves too seriously. I wouldn't say they take jujitsu too seriously, because that sounds like a bad statement. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking jujitsu seriously. Uh, but I think when you think it is I really think when you think it's the only value that there is like doing jujitsu, right? You start to create this little echo chamber where everybody who cool that does jujitsu. And then you go, well, now I'm starting to get better. I'm a blue belt now, or I'm a purple belt now, or I'm a black belt now. And maybe I have a podcast, and maybe that podcast is getting bigger. People are starting to recognize me at jujitsu tournaments. Wow, that must mean that I'm relevant. And it doesn't. It really, really doesn't. When you do that, though, like the guys that we see, I'm going to try to say this without saying it. I'll dance around this one a little bit, which I don't usually do. But we see gyms, we see associations that have these horrible things happen that start from the top. Whether those things are sexual assaults, whether those things are stealing money, whether those things are just something immoral. And I told you guys earlier, I've been around jiu-jitsu for a long time. I have seen so many guys that I looked up to, and I've seen so many guys that I thought were awesome that I never even actually met, uh, fall because they thought themselves relevant. They thought themselves important. They get a little bit. Jiu-jitsu fame is it's honestly pretty easy to come by. I've come by it on accident on the negative side of it quite a few times, where like I'm getting submitted and it gets posted on Flow Grappling or something like that. But jiu-jitsu fame, because it's such a small, tight-knit community, it is not that hard to come by. And for a lot of people, they get, whether locally, whether they start to become the most known white belt in their area, or internationally, they become the most known black belt. At some point, for most people, it starts to change them because they say, well, I'm important. Like this stuff really matters. Jiu-jitsu doesn't matter, man. Jiu-jitsu's fun. Don't make it more than that. Don't put it as something. And again, this is just my opinion. If you want to do this, do whatever you want. But I've just seen so many people I really like and respect go down because of this. Go down because they take themselves too seriously. And it starts at white belt. We talk about checking our ego. Love to talk about that stuff. But does anybody actually really do it? No, of course not. Go submit a black belt at a gym. And they will be mad at you. They will want to kill you. Almost every gym I go to, there are guys that do. There are guys that I will go in and train super hard with and be like, oh my gosh, I tried to kill this guy. He was not offended in any way. I did kill this guy. He wasn't offended in any way. He loved it. He asked me questions after. Those are the guys that don't take themselves too seriously, right? But the people that can't do that, they take themselves too seriously. I know I'm using that term too many times, take themselves too seriously, because some of the other stuff that I wanted to say, I decided to not say on this point. I think it's probably just better that way. So let's look at point number 9. That is not learning anything besides jiu-jitsu technique. Okay. So this can be a lot of the things that I said on this. This can be pretty broad. We can go pretty broad on this, but I would say one of the first things that people don't ever start to learn, especially as a white belt, is learning concepts, learning things that matter in more than one spot, right? So something I've talked about on the show is like chest over chest distance management. Okay. So when passing the guard, when on top, having my chest over my opponent's chest almost every single time is better, especially if I can keep my chest over their chest and they can't elevate me over or back, right? So like staying in that range, staying in that distance, learning something like that versus just learning guard passes, right? You learn an idea that you can apply to pretty much any guard pass. Or a different idea is like, okay, most of these guard passes, I have to either control or beat the legs and then gain upper body control. And so, you learn a leg weave pass and you go, okay, well, I'm grabbing the pant legs and I have the legs tied. Now I'm going to reach for the lapel. Now I'm going to reach up for the collar and I can pass. Well, yeah, you had both controls, right? But you can also apply it and say, okay, I'm going to pass. And you go to pass and they break the collar grip and you don't get the guard pass. You go, okay, well, that's really simple. I know exactly why I didn't get the guard pass. It's because I couldn't keep upper body control. How could I keep that, right? When you start to learning concepts, a lot of times jiu-jitsu becomes easier to learn on your own. It becomes easier to do by yourself. If you guys like that idea of concepts, be sure to, I think I've had Chris Paynes on 3 different times on the show. Be sure to go to any of those episodes. That's pretty much all we talk about is concept. But then also there are other things that aren't jiu-jitsu technique. Learning to, I've talked about this on the show, learning to market, learning to brand. That is important, right? We talked about being careful that we don't take ourselves too seriously. A lot of times people make their brand like their personal Instagram. I don't think you should do that. Not that you shouldn't post family stuff and stuff like that, but like they post their drama on it and they post all kinds of negative stuff on it. And sometimes it seems personal and then sometimes it seems like they're branding, right? I think that learning to brand and creating your own jiu-jitsu brand early on is super important, even if you don't care to ever sell anything, or even if you don't think that you will ever do anything business wise or whatever in jiu-jitsu space. It just helps meet new people. If you have a cool Instagram name and you have a recognizable face, people are going to know you just at tournaments. They go, oh yeah, I know this guy. This is the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show guy, right? Really easy. More people probably would remember that than they would Josh McKinney, right? Going in and branding yourself early on, that can be something that I know we're talking about, not just learning BJJ technique. That can be something that is not BJJ technique, but is jiu-jitsu related and could definitely benefit you in the future, especially if you decided to open a gym, especially if you ever wanted a sponsorship, especially if you decided to start a YouTube channel. Having that branding already would be really nice. Learn how to do it up front. And I mean, like, I've got white belts that have sponsorships and have created jiu-jitsu businesses, in blue belts. Right now, dang, I don't even know. I do. Never mind. I was going to say, I have not even sponsored. I actually just signed a contract to be a sponsored athlete of Kicksite. Man, that should be the number 10 point. Not having Kicksite at your gym, that would be a terrible thing to have. But more on that later. We'll get into that later. And the last thing, the number 10, this was going to be my number 7 point, but the biggest mistake that I see white belts make is they quit. Sometimes quitting jiu-jitsu is the best option. I think probably very seldom is it, but I'm sure that there's some scenario that quitting jiu-jitsu is the best option. For most people, though, once you quit, you don't come back. I have seen so few people quit for an entire year of jiu-jitsu and then get their black belts. It's cool. I actually have 3 guys that will be my next 3 black belts, and all 3 of them have done that. They took a time, like a extended period of time where they weren't training, and have all come back. And I'm pretty confident that all three will eventually get their black belts. I promote slow, though it'll be 10 years from now probably, but so seldom does that happen. Like once you quit, it's very hard to get back in jiu-jitsu, especially at the same gym, because you go in and you go, well, these guys were white belts when I left. 2 years later, not only are they blue belts, but they beat me down so easily. And it's very discouraging, right? I think if you follow the other 9 rules, you won't quit. But understand that quitting a lot of times in jiu-jitsu is kind of permanent. At least from what I've seen, most people that quit, they struggle to ever find a reason to come back. I don't exactly know why that is, but I know that quitting is not conducive to getting your black belt. I know that even taking a year break or taking a 6-month break is not conducive to getting your black belt. Obviously, sometimes people have financial issues. They just can't pay anymore, but just trying to make sure that you can, if you're going to go, so say you have a 6-month span where you have a new schedule at school or work, and it looks like you're going to only be able to make 1 class a week. And you're like, well, I can only make 1 class a week. It's just not worth it. I should quit. Make that 1 class a week. Even if it's 1 class every 2 weeks, make that 1 class every 2 weeks. Be consistent. Keep it as part of your schedule. Make sure that you are still a grappler. Make sure you are still a jiu-jitsu fighter. Don't let that fall away. Don't quit that and lose your consistency, because it is so hard to find once you've lost it. And so that's what I'll leave you guys with is, no matter what, if you don't follow anything else that I just said, you're a jerk, you're on the wrong team, you get frustrated, all these things. You don't understand pacing. Your jiu-jitsu feels like a job. You take yourself too seriously, all these things. Maybe you should quit if you don't follow all 9 of them. But if not, if maybe you're a good guy and you follow everything else, don't quit. Just stay in. Keep training, keep consistent. And if you need to, don't be afraid to make a change, whether in your routine, whether in your team that you're on, or whether just any of it, how you train, how you think about jiu-jitsu. Don't be afraid to make a change. If you're willing to make big adjustments, you're willing to make big changes, you will get so much better. I feel like for me, in the last year, I've made more changes to my schedule and my ideas and my routine than I have ever. And I'm a black belt. I've been doing this for a long time. You would think I would have it figured out, but there is never a time that you will have it figured out. Don't be afraid to make changes. That should have been point 11. Don't be afraid to make changes. I'll remember that the next time I do this. That's all I have for you guys today. And that is the episode. Hope you guys liked this one. Always love talking about white belts. White belts are people, man. People don't think that, most people don't think that, but they are people for sure. I always love to do this joke where anytime somebody gets especially if it's like a girl that I know, like a family member, or even somebody that trains at the gym, but they start dating somebody that doesn't do jiu-jitsu. And you guys can use this one too. This is a great joke. And so in order to emasculate their new partner, what I'll always ask is, oh, what belt is he? And then he's not a belt, he doesn't train. And so that's always something fun to do. I don't know where that came from. That's a fun fact though. Yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I didn't really have much else other than content. No good jokes, nothing, no good stories for you. Nothing for you guys. I apologize. This episode has been terrible. It's been off the rails the whole time. It's been atrocious. I promise next week it'll be better. No, I'm just kidding. I enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed recording it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed listening to it. I think that's it. I can't think of anything else. I feel like I've been ranting for a long time now. Let's end this one. hope you guys like this episode. Hope you guys love the show. Hope you guys really, really, really are loving the content we're putting out at simplifyingjujitsu.com, and be on the lookout because we're going to be putting out some new stuff. We haven't actually released much new content over the last like 6 to 8 months, but we have a few really, really, really big things that we've been planning on getting out. And so those are just going to be when we get them finished, to be honest. A lot of the things are just working on a lot of different projects at once, and we're going to start releasing them really soon. So be sure to be on the lookout for that stuff. And most importantly, I hope today's episode helps you suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day.